Welcome to Killer Women with your host, best-selling author Danielle Girard. And now, Danielle's next killer woman.
Hello, and welcome to Killer Women Podcast, a proud member of the Authors on the Air global network with more than 4 million listeners. I'm your host, suspense author Danielle Girard, and my guest today is Miranda Smith. Miranda writes psychological and domestic suspense novels with a hint of horror. She is drawn to stories about ordinary people in extraordinary situations, complicated women, and dark impulses. She lives in East Texas with her husband and 3 children. Her latest novel, Scary Movie Night, is what we're here to talk about. Welcome, Miranda.
Yes, thank you so much.
I love that. I love that you are drawn to complicated women. That's my favorite.
Yes.
Those are my favorite to talk about. And this book is actually really very full of complicated women. So before we dig
hmm
into all the incredibly fun things about Scary Movie Night, tell our listeners a little about the story.
Okay, so Scary Movie Night is about a movie themed birthday party gone wrong, which is one of my favorite tropes. I love a dinner party gone wrong. I love when all the drama is taking place in one night. But our main character is Tippy. She is obsessed with movies, especially older movies. She's actually a movie review blogger. And so for her 35th birthday, her parent or her friends throw her this grand party at her grandmother's mansion outside of the city, and lots of bad things unfold from there.
And her grandmother, tell us, okay, I want to like start because I think she lost her parents, so she's
hmm
Marmee is her only family, and she's
Yeah,
recently broken off an engagement. She was engaged, and so she's about to leave the country, literally, to like go and travel
yeah,
after this devastating breakup. But Marmee, like, I want to know, and you actually dedicate the book to your own grandparents,
yeah,
which I thought was really
I
cute.
do.
So you obviously had really, a bit grandparents who had a huge impact on you. So how was Marmee born, or how was the story born, and how did you develop Marmee? Because I feel like she's not that active in the role of the party. She's sort of in the
hmm
background, but she seems like she's such a main character in the world of this book. So tell us about how it came to be.
Yeah, Marmee is definitely very important to Tippy. And like you said, she's about the only family she has left. And she was one of my favorite characters to create for this book because I had the premise, I had the idea of, okay, I want Tippy, she's obsessed with movies. Okay, we'll make her a movie blogger. Um, but I felt like in this day and age, I really had to make her love of older movies and Hitchcock relevant. And it was actually something, I talked about with my editor before I went through and wrote this book is like, do you think there's enough Hitchcock lovers in this day and age to really support a book like this? And thank goodness there is.
Oh, for
Um,
sure. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, definitely. I know when I was a former high school teacher, I actually had a film studies class and I would show them some of these older movies, and a lot of them did not know who Hitchcock was. So I just, as I get older, I'm like, is this, love for this type of film dying out? Thankfully, it's not. But so I wanted to give Tippy a compelling reason to love this older style of movie. And so I started writing it as if her grandmother had passed, and, she had all these childhood memories of watching scary movies with her grandmother. And then as I got deeper into the writing, I thought, why don't we just have Marmee still be around? I think she's a big presence in Tippy's life. So let's bring her into the book. And so that was a lot of fun to do.
And her home has that. I mean, she's like you said, she's in this mansion, and there's like a Hitchcock themed fountain, right, with the birds.
Yeah.
I mean, she clearly also was a movie lover, which is where it comes from. And
Mhm.
your love of and knowledge of movies so also penetrates the book. Like there's the
Thank you.
scenes that are like you intersperse it with the Hitchcockian and the rear all those movies, right? Like
Yeah.
just so fun. So, how did you figure out the structure of the book? Tell the readers a little bit of the structure. I don't think it spoils anything. And then also, like, so
Mhm.
how did that come to be? Was that also initially imagined, or did that come later?
Well, this book has a three-act structure. And so act one is just following, introducing these characters, and we kind of get the setup with the party. And then as you would hope, something really big happens at the end of Act One. And so Act Two kind of takes us into different territory. We're still following the present timeline of the guests at this party. We're also going a little bit further back into Tippy's past and kind of seeing what was going on in her life leading up to this party. You talk about the breakup. This is one of the things that's really heavy on her. She's had this wedding planned and decided to call it off. She's decided to take off and, kind of have, I guess, a walkabout around Europe and find herself again.
Right.
And so all of that is kind of explored in Act Two. So you get flashbacks interspersed with the present timeline. And then you also get just little nuggets of movie reviews written by Tippy.
Right.
We find out in chapter 1 that she's written this book called Tippy's Takes Presents. And it's kind of an ode to a love letter to Hitchcock movies. So you just get, it's not enough to really take you out of the story, but just enough to kind of pay tribute to those great Hitchcockian movies. And they're also kind of connected to what's going on in the present and past as well.
That was because that was sort of what I was referring to, because I think that's, and I always wonder when those things show up, like little snippets of a conversation, but in this case, those cute, like, little bits of her book, the movie review part, snippets. Were those originally in your, did you imagine, like, so sometimes these things come as, and I don't know about you if you're a plotter, but sometimes they come later. And I'm always curious to know where in your process did that come to you? Did that idea come to you?
Pretty early on. With the book that came out before this, Smile for the Cameras, it's also very movie heavy, but more like 90s, early 2000s type movies instead of the vintage movies. So with that movie, or excuse me, with that book, Smile for the Cameras, I had actually written a screenplay. And so we got kind of sections of the screenplay in between chapters. And so I guess that was still kind of on my mind. And I thought, I want to do something similar. How can I make it fit for this book?
Yeah.
And her job as a movie review blogger, I thought was just the perfect way to kind of weave it in.
And then it was also a costume party, of course. So everybody was dressed, as a character from one of the movies. So, okay, so let's go back. And she has this, there are these sort of group of 4 women who were, college friends and, and have now gotten, to, been out of college for whatever, 13 years, right? And it's an interesting dynamic because, right, of course, like, there are those friends that you made at a sort of pivotal time of your life who you become attached to, and sometimes those relationships can last, the rest of your lives, and sometimes things change. Did you, when you were thinking about these women, did you have those kinds of friendships that have maintained, that have, stayed? Some of those women, you can feel them, there's some tension between them that's developing, that some people aren't meant to be our friends forever.
Right. And that's something I really, are you there? Sorry.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was something I wanted to explore when I was writing this. Just the idea of relationships in general and what's the difference between those that kind of fall by the wayside and those that are really built to last. I love the phrase, that people are in your life for a reason or a season. Sometimes you can hold on to these relationships because you think you should, and it's kind of detrimental to you and detrimental to your growth as a person. And so I thought this was a really interesting thing to look at, this phase of life where, people are talking about getting married, they're talking about having babies, but they're still kind of locked into those old people they used to be. Where do we go from here?
Right, right. So are you somebody who sort of plans out a novel? How does a novel happen for you?
I would say I'm about 70% plotter, 30% pantser. I tend to start with a rough outline, and I'm a big fan of the Save the Cat model. I think that's because I'm, again, a big movie watcher as well. So I'm always trying to come up with kind of those thematic, fast-paced reading experiences. I don't follow it just religiously, but it's always like a good foundation for me to set things up. So I'll just try to come up with like my main story beats, my opening, my midpoint, different the different events that are going to take place in each act. But then I leave a lot of blank space so that I can kind of fill it out as I go. Because again, like we were talking about at the beginning, when I sat down to write my outline for this, Marmee wasn't a living character in the book. She was, someone that Marmee would, or that Tippy would think about from time to time. So I always leave enough space to when the characters or the story just kind of speak to me, I can change it as I go.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And then how much do you feel like once the sort of first draft is done, does the story sort of feel solid to you, or is that when you're like then you realize sort of who those characters are, or do you develop the characters sort of in the outlining stage?
I think the first draft, you've seen before, I'm sure that the first draft is you're just telling yourself the story. I definitely agree with that a lot, because certain personalities will change as I'm writing. Usually by the end of that first draft, I kind of have a clear idea. And then when I'm going in for that structural edit is when I feel the story really, really starts to solidify. And then, of course, when I get my editor's eye on it and we can kind of brainstorm together, different ways to enhance it even more.
So, so now that you sort of, and you have, so I know you have books before, the two Bantam books.
Yeah.
Are movies sort of like, I mean, these two books really, and obviously your love of movies and that you taught movies. I mean,
Yeah.
so do you feel like that's kind of like a spot you love to, you want to keep exploring?
Yeah. I mean, I think that it's a lot of fun. All of my books with Bookouture, the publisher I was with before I was with Bantam, most of those are domestic suspense.
Okay.
So very, I call them like Desperate Housewives type murder mysteries. And I love that type of book as well. But when I was writing Small for the Cameras, the one that came out before Scary Movie Night, I knew it was kind of in that movie cinema world. And so I wanted to find a home for it that could really explore that. And so I um, I was happy to be able to write two books kind of back to back with
Yeah.
kind of this movie um, theme going throughout. It's something that I would like to keep doing as, readers keep liking these types of books. It's something I've always enjoyed. I love a behind the scenes of a podcast or a movie type mystery. So I think it's fun to explore.
So fun. So let's talk a little bit more about the women in the story because of course that's
Okay.
here we are, killer women. And there's the question about like, and without we're not doing spoilers, but there is a question like, what do you think about, is there a sort of pressure point after which we are pushed where we would, where you can kind of push somebody to do something, out of character, right? Like I think each of
Yeah.
these women in one way or another acts out of character or out of the character that they maybe particularly who they think they are, right?
Hmm.
Because we all like to think we're like, we play by the rules and we would, whatever. But but I wonder about that. Like, is that something that shows up in your stories? Because I think that I love the way each of them really, and
Hmm.
I'm not talking about like necessarily like violence. I'm just saying like each of them did something, said something, acted in some way that I think the college version of them maybe wouldn't have expected.
Yeah. No, I think that's my favorite thing about writing thrillers, reading thrillers. It's not just this constant love of gore and bloodshed, although that can be fun in small doses. But what I really enjoy is just kind of the psychology behind it and the behavior that these characters display. How do people act and behave in the most extreme situations? And so as a writer, that's what I'm always trying to do is take a bunch of different personalities and put them in an extreme situation and see how they're going to react. And what they do can be surprising to me, can be surprising to them, and it can definitely have lots of ripple effects within the group.
Yeah, and the other thing I love about this story in particular is it's really much, very much of a locked room. I mean, they, not only are they in this sort of isolated, beautiful environment, nobody brought a car, there's no
Hmm.
cell service, and there's no
Yeah.
phone in the home. So
Yeah.
that really like ups the tension. And you can feel that sort of like it really is another sort of flashback to that to an earlier day. Like, obviously in the Hitchcock films there were no cell phones, right? Nobody was on
Right.
their phone and texting for help. So which, so is that I assume that was, obviously I know it was intentional that you said it, that, set it up that way, of course. But was it from the get-go, were you like, how are we going to do it? Because this is the problem a little bit with the modern suspense. How do we navigate
Yes.
a world where, cameras and everything is sort of seen, right?
Yes. No, I've had this conversation several times. It's hard for a crime fiction writer to convincingly come up with different scenarios because we are so monitored now in terms of, the cell phone, the Apple Watch. I mean, there's cameras on every street corner. You compare that kind of life to, a Jimmy Stewart movie that came out in the 60s, it's completely different. And so I wanted to kind of have that feel, but make it in a realistic way. Um, First of all, living in the South, there are still several areas where we don't have cell phone service. I still have like several um, uh, family members and friends who don't have internet at their house, or you have to go to a third party property to get service. So to me, that wasn't that out there, but I can definitely see where where it's very common to have service, in most places. But and then like you said, there's not a phone on the property. Marmy is kind of a stubborn
Yeah.
person, and she's also very privileged in that she has a lot of people in and out of the house. She has someone who works at her house, different like groundskeepers and chefs in and out of the house. So she's kind of in a position that, if I don't want to fool with this technology, I don't want to fool with the phone, I don't have to.
Right. Right.
So there is a phone on the property, and we kind of have a side quest to go find that. But not having it within the house makes it difficult, obviously, when an emergency breaks out. But
Yeah, and I kind of I know there's like there's always going to be a reader who's like, well, that's not believable. And to that I say, well, it's called fiction for a reason. And
yeah,
also like you build up you sort of build up the logistics of why Marmy lives this way. And there's still tons of places. I live in Montana, tons of places where there's no cell service. I mean, whole
yeah,
swaths of, and that's actually sometimes that's why we go to where we go, is because you can,
right,
right? So I appreciate that, and I also appreciate the fact that Mommy's also like, she's however old she is, she's like, if something's gonna happen in the middle of the night and I need a phone, so be it. Like, I'm not, I got to this stage this way.
yeah.
You know what I mean? Versus having a phone that rings off the hook kind of thing,
Yeah, a lot of that goes back to her personality as well. And it was really important for me. Marmy's in her 80s, but she's very, very mentally aware. I did not want to write just like a feeble
Yeah.
type character. She still has tons of personality, and which does impact the plot and definitely impacts Tippy and her worldview. So, yeah, a lot of that goes back to her character, which again was one of my favorite parts to
Yeah,
write
yeah,
in the
I
book.
can you can tell the love between Tippy, between Tippy and Marmy was really fun.
Yeah,
And I love that, and again, this is not a spoiler, but I love that Marmy knows a lot more about what's going. I mean, she's secluded in her room for the evening, but she's not
yeah,
at all clueless about what is, about some of the things that are, going on in her
yes,
granddaughter's life, which I really appreciate too, because it just shows the level of how bright she is, how sharp she is, and also the closeness between the two of them.
yes.
So it was super fun. And it does
Thank
make,
you.
I don't know if everyone else, but it makes me want to go back and watch. Like, I really want to watch Rear Window again. Like some of those movies, and there's a few in there that I haven't seen. So I was like, okay, now I
Oh,
feel like
cool.
I need to have like a Hitchcock marathon weekend. It needs to rain or something. So yeah, I'm curious to know, and I don't, some people say I can't tell you. Can you talk about what you're working on now?
Well, I'm working on another thriller. This one is a different location. It's set in more of a tropical setting, but the same kind of isolation thriller type vibes, weekend gone wrong. And that's about all I can share right
Okay,
now. But
that's her.
um, it's fun. I love this stage of writing where it's not fully formed yet,
Yeah.
right? And so you have all the ideas and you're getting it out there, and then you're with each pass of the manuscript making it more complete. So
That's so fun. Well, so
yeah.
I am not a Save the Cat person. You're not the first to mention it, but
Mm-mm.
for those people who don't know it, can you give us a sense for sort of how it sets it up? Is it the 8 beats? Is that what when you?
I'm not sure how many beats. I know I usually uh, list it in 40, like so most 40 chapters, but
Okay.
you can break that up,
Yeah.
or combine them as needed. But usually, like Act One is 10, Act Two is 20, and then Act Three is 10. And you just have your different beats um, for the different emotional points you want to hit in the story. I really value Save the Cat when it comes to writing Act Three because I feel like they give you a lot of precise story beats for how to amp that up as much as possible. That's one of the you'll see readers say sometimes like, oh, it was a really good book, but it felt like they just wrapped it up, you
Yeah.
know. And so I want to really try and make that ending as satisfying as possible. Um, and also including like multiple twists. I think that's important in thrillers.
Yeah.
We get so much pressure for the plot twist. What's the plot twist going to be? My favorite thrillers, it's usually not just one huge twist. It's a lot of little
Yeah.
surprising moments along the way. So,
Yes,
um,
which you accomplished very successfully.
oh, thank you so much.
I thought it was very successful. That's super fun. So Miranda, we will be giving away a copy of Scary Movie Night. Um,
Awesome.
over on Instagram at Killer Women Podcast or on Facebook at Danielle's Killer Women. But before we go, tell our listeners, where they can find you, where they can read about your other books,
Yeah.
website, the socials, all the fun stuff.
I'm most active on Instagram and TikTok at Miranda Smith Writer. And then I have my website, mirandasmithwriter.com, where I have all the information about my different books, events I have coming up. I have a lot of fun events coming up for Scary Movie Night in July. So I'm really excited about that.
That is super fun. Well, this was really fun. Everyone, thank you so much for joining us today with Miranda Smith and Scary Movie Night. And we will see you next time. Bye.
Thank you for having me.